Hi there. We are going to continue with this Miasmic Malignifier. Um, Yesterday, we got some good base coat stuff down. Ended up, after some deliberation, the sort of clayish color is actually Gilliman flesh. It's a contrast paint. I think this is one of the first times I've used a contrast paint, kind of like you're supposed to. Um, we got a good base in there with, let's see, that was Rack Hearth Flesh. We dry brushed a little bit with Rack White and then put Gilliman Flesh all over it, so lots of fleshy colors. That's good stuff. Today, to sort of get this model starting to match some of the other stuff in my army, going to use the old classic lead belcher on all of the round metallic stuff on here. So you can see these connectors, also these tubes. They'll get lead belcher. And then anything that's truly spiky will get Warplock bronze. So this will actually be a decent amount of work this evening. If we get through that, I'll either start working on all these tiny little, you see details, there's the boils growing through the pottery, which is so gross. There's also these flies attached to it. I may end up getting to hit some of those. There's this little glop that's seeping out of these intestinal tubes. So we may hit some of that too. So let's see how it goes. But it's a pretty decently sized model, and there's a lot of metallic trim on all sides. You've got obviously that big grate. You've got this whole thing down here, and then to top it off, we've also got an array of Nurgle Christmas ornaments that hang on the blessed tree. It's a couple bells, a couple sensors. Those are getting all metallics. I primed those purely in black because they're just getting metallics. And they actually hang off with these cute little hooks, which is really neat. It's an excellent feature of the model. I'm still trying to figure out a way how I'll pack this up. I want some tiny little case to put these in so I don't actually have to glue them by these hooks. I can just hang them on the tree. Also opens up the option for hanging other stuff on it later. So maybe I'll either kit bash some stuff, or as this thing sits in my little makeshift display, maybe I'll make it some Christmas ornaments this year. Who knows? This would make a fine Christmas tree in the middle of your living room. I also might hit these skulls because they're pretty big. Once I get all the metallics done and the details and the skulls and stuff, then we can start washing, and that's a pretty big step on this guy. So let's get to it. I'm going to start with Warplock Bronze, my old favorite. It's a truly great color. These things get thick. A question, don't know. Can you actually just thin out what's in the pot with some water? These acrylics are water-based, right? I don't know. It's a good question. It's starting to get somewhat challenging to just get those things out of the pots. So I might have to consider that. Let's see, brush to use. I think this one is soft enough. Yeah, it is. It is. Get myself a nice little spot here on my wet palette. I was a little skeptical about wet palettes ahead of time. They aren't 100% necessary. But they are nice, and I see now why they're used. You know, if you're sitting here for a while, you end up wasting a lot of paint on a solid palette. And these guys just allow you to make a little dab or a spot. You can control how loose the paint is a little bit better. And the consistency stays more similar while it's sitting in the palette because it's not drying constantly while you're working. There we go. Oh, welcome back to Warplock Bronze. Every time I try to deviate from this color, from this metallic, I keep coming back. And it really is a central theme throughout the army. There's just a richness to it that I genuinely enjoy. It allows you to get some metallic sheen without basically without brightening things up. It's very nice. So on this model, a lot of these spiky bits, you got to kind of be careful with, not just for your own safety, but just be gentle to your brush. It's really easy. I'm cruel to my brushes, that's for sure. I try not to be, but it's just one of those things. I'm a little bit sloppy. But as you're painting, there's a lot of these tough corners, and you sort of can just bang up the bristles, get them caught in there. So you want to take a light touch where possible, if you can restrain yourself. And I'm not too worried about all of these things that are raised up, these bands of metal. I'm not too worried about getting the perpendicular edges that are close to this ceramic stuff. I'm going to wash this guy pretty aggressively. I haven't decided if it's going to be grime or rust. I was thinking rust originally, but I've gone with a redder color scheme, so I might just go with grime. But anyway, where those things meet up, that grime's going to blend those areas just fine on its own. I know that I'm going to be heavy-handed with it. I am psyched to be on the metal phase. This is a fun model, dangerous model, super dangerous model. The spikes are real. You start picking up Death Guard stuff, you realize very quickly that the spiky bits are no joke. As I move this thing around in my hand, every single time I grab it, I'm sort of moving my fingers around a little bit in the back to find a spot that's comfortable. Of course, right now I'm going around the outside and I'm turning in one direction, so it's pretty likely I'm missing the entire sides of some of these. I'll have to get inside there. I'm not too worried about getting all the way in there. I did, when I primed this, shoot black into all the chimneys, which A, means that they'll be dark on the inside, so we don't have to worry about this wraithbone screaming from inside. But B, it also, because it's that primer coat, and I'm not doing too many coats over this stuff, it'll naturally darken things up by all these spikes. So when I get into making it look sooty and grimy, I won't be going up against a white color. SMRT smart. Essentially what I did is zenithal, I always worry about that word. Such a Skyrim-y sounding thing. I feel like I'm talking about some town here where you start in Skyrim. Basically an inverse version of that. Normally what you do is you take something very dark, like a black, and then from a specific angle, most likely top down some way, zenithal, you'd prime it lighter, and you'd get some natural light highlights. This is basically the opposite. Most of this thing was primed in Wraithbone, except for those spots. I mean, you can obviously see it here. I shot some in there. So the other point of that is that, like, obviously I could have left that open, but like banging around a brush on the inside of this thing doesn't sound like fun. It mainly just needs to be dark in there. It's very convenient because all the dark spots are chimney furnace things, so I'm taking advantage of that. All right, so now we got to make sure we get these inside bits nice and shiny. Nice and shiny, but dark. Shiny and grim. There we go. These are going to be a little awkward in spots to paint. It's okay, I like awkward. These spots, these little chimneys, I imagine I will get through a pass, and then I'll pick the thing up again, see a spot, as usual. These are just very susceptible to missing spots. Anytime you have the model with something that is circular like this, perpendicular to sort of where you look at, you're always going to be spinning it in one direction and really focus on one angle. When you spin it the other way, you find all the other stuff you didn't hit. That's the fun of it. It's a puzzle every time. Free toy in every box. I did receive my couple Chaos Lords, which I'm psyched about. 2 of those. I'm going to just Death Guard up a little bit because they not super Death Guardy. Try not to glare you like crazy. They're straight up like Chaos Space Marine Lords. It's a really cool model. So a couple of them I'm going to not fully kit bash, but swap some parts in and out for some Death Guard bits that I've got. And then the third one I'm going to literally just kit bash from scratch. And that'll be a fun lesson. It'll be the first time that I've really swapped parts. And I really started thinking about it with this model because there's so many bits that it comes with that you can absolutely consider using on other models. There's a lot of really good props. Like these spikes are all separate pieces with their little bases, circular bases. So with or without it, depending on how they fit, they can go onto some vehicle. You could absolutely, have a Rhino with like 4 curved spikes on it. And it doesn't super diminish this model by just keeping some stuff aside. Tricks for later. Absolute lobster cleaning hands right now. Live in New England. Every once in a while, you pick up a bunch of lobsters and boil them, and before you present them on table, you generally, out of courtesy, like crack the tails off, crack the claws off, and they're all little spiky things like this. And you sit down to eat, you just naturally feel like a little bit of pain in your hands from all the tiny micro cuts you get. I'm suffering from my art on camera, folks. Don't all cry at once. There we go. All right, I'm going to move down. These guys want to be, or try to find a place to put my pinky to settle this thing. I just want to be careful. Not too careful. This will be grimy business. So part of the reason I want to get through all the details as soon as possible, not just these metallics, is I'm going to varnish this thing before I grime it. You don't have to do that, but what I found out working on the Tyrant is that the mineral spirit, neutral spirit, white spirit that you use to sort of smooth out the grime, you want some layer of protection behind it before you hit it with that, so the grime stuff sort of slides off easily. It allows you to be to use not a heavy hand, light-handed. Light-handed is what you mean. I'm going to use a lot of grime on this, but your amount of control that you have with then, it's a reductive method. You throw a bunch of grime on it, then you use the neutral spirits, the white spirits, to pull it off in certain spots. The easier it is to pull off, the more of a light touch you can have with it. And I want to give that a try, because I didn't on the night. The night turned out fine. A lot of times after I work on something in a practical sense, I go back and look some stuff up, see what some real artists have done, what their thoughts are on it. Obviously, I do a little research before I touch anything, but I don't actually do that much. The sort of surprise of something new is not something I want to just yield. I don't feel like it's a spoiler But with new paints and stuff, it is exciting when you try something out that you've never messed with. There we go. This is going just fine. So I'm going to varnish it because some nice guy said that it was helpful. I varnished my typhus and that turned out pretty well. It does change the overall, it's kind of point of varnish, but you have to keep in mind it does change the overall sort of lighting, sort of the ambient lighting, I guess. You're putting a brand new finish over the whole thing. And in the case of typhus, I did make it all the way around. There we go. Just real quick in there. He looks a little bit darker. He's got a matte finish to him because I used a matte varnish. So you want to keep that in mind. He doesn't really stand out, but all of his colors sort of locked in underneath that finish, which is great protection. You are supposed to handle these models. They're going to go in a game, but you have to remember you're changing how the light reflects off of it globally. That's why I say it's like ambient light, like in terms of how it might be if you were doing lighting in a video game or any other application. Like the lighting model is like ambient, there's directional, there's all this stuff. And so that varnish, because it's sprayed on the whole thing, changes the whole thing. We can set that down for 1 second. See if I can just give you an example of that. This guy, I don't know if it's going to even be clear. Yeah, it is. The guy on the left, that's typhus. He's all varnished. The guy underneath him, not. So it's not just that he's kind of dark. But every little bit of him, I think the spots that I tried to miss were like the blade. He's just the light hits him just a bit differently. He's got a sheen, even though it's a matte finish. You can see that like his treatment's just a little bit different, even though the color scheme and painting techniques are identical. It's just something to keep in mind. I don't think I'll varnish all of my models, but I might at some point. But I don't think I will. I'm kind of okay with my poxwalkers, maybe. I don't think I have to defend them with my life. I don't think so. I'll just get up again. I'll just give him a repaint. Hey, good evening. I'm good. Mini Barad-dûr Tower from the top down. You know what? That is a good call. I'm good. I'm really good. It's good for the week to be over. A very special place in my heart for Barad-dûr. I worked a lot with the Lord of the Rings franchise for several years. It does. It has got vibes, strong vibes in that direction. And that's why I like it so much. It subconsciously brings me back. How are you doing? How was your week? There we go. Just getting in there a little bit. Not too worried about the grooving. I am going to try to avoid my flies though. I'm not sure how I'm going to make those flies stand out. I definitely want to use something green toned with them because it'll make them pop. I'm not sure what yet. I don't think I want anything shiny. But I say that a lot and then I make things shiny. Yeah, this has got some deep Lord of the Rings vibes on it. So many things have that vibe. Tolkien and vis-a-vis Tolkien, Peter Jackson, have had a pretty profound effect on the aesthetics of nerddom. Oh, that hurts. I'm grabbing this in a not so happy way on the back side of this. Move my hands around a little bit. Yeah, I'm glad this week's over. It was a good week. A lot of good stuff done at work, but it was tiring. One of those like happy to be done with it weeks. All right, now I got to be careful to move my hands down a bit. Um, this is interesting because I was thinking a bunch of the round stuff. I think this whole loop needs to be Warplock bronze. I think it does. I think it does. Yeah, because I'm going to hit these with it. It's going to look weird if it connects. Yeah, it's good to slide into home base the weekend. Definitely good. There's a little bit of illness going around my house. It hasn't hit me yet, but super tiny human has it, and it really is something I'm sympathetic to because when you're a 1-year-old with a cold, you can't do anything to help yourself. It really is like the most pathetic thing you've ever seen. Um, you're just sick. You're just stuck being sick. You can't blow your own nose effectively. You can't cough really effectively. It's always reactive. You can't clear your own throat. And she's just suffering. Um, I think my wife's getting it, which means I'm going to get it. But not tonight. Tonight we paint. If I huff enough paint fumes, it'll protect my nasal cavity from invasion. Yeah, it is. It's weird what you see in little kids. You think about like, wow, they don't have any tools to handle this weird situation. Like I think about communication all the time. My 1-year-old is like just starting to use words, but she's absolutely in that phase where there's some amount of recognition. Like she knows her head, shoulders, knees, toes, nose, eyes, mouth. She can point them out. So she can sort out nouns. She's got good noun identification, but you can't tell you if she wants more of something or less. Her usage of the word no is more of a game than anything else. You think about like, wow, just starting to learn your only language, how absolutely frustrating that must be. Um, like you can't just look at someone and be like, why don't I tell you to make my life easier, not even caring about making your life easier, that like I need a clean diaper or it's cold. Clean diaper is like pretty easy to sort out if there are signs. But whether or not the kid's cold or their shirt's itchy or they have an upset stomach, they just all they can kind of do is just go ah. That's all they get. A 2-year-old, she's pushing 3 really. Um, she's got a little time. I could see it in her like right around when she started forming phrases. The absolute frustration on her face with not being able to easily communicate, having the tools at her fingertips, the tip of her tongue, so to speak, but not like she understood, but she couldn't form everything just yet. It was a while ago. Now she's a total pain in the butt. I love it. She definitely form what she wants to say now. She just picks and chooses when she feels like being helpful or not. She's not a brat. Well, she's got brat sometimes, 2-year-old, but she definitely messes with me, which I think is fantastic. I get a lot of laughs out of that little kid. All right. Moving on to big spiky boys. I'm gonna go all the way to the bolts that these things bolts like those round things that these are on. Maybe not. Maybe fork in the road. Decision time. Maybe these guys get lead belcher. And I'll just wipe that paint off. There you go. It's like it never happened. Good job, Q-Tip. Should get a Q-Tip sponsorship. I think I might lead belcher these guys. They are separate enough. I worry that it's going to be too much of that bronze and not enough things going back and forth. So I'll just hit these stripes for now. At the very least, if I do go back and do these in Warplock bronze, I'll do it later. Commit to it later based on how everything else is looking. There we go. The Fulgrim book continues to impress. I'm at the spot where he's having this big chat with Horus. Horus is like, yo, man. And Fulgrim's pretty screwed up right now. Like, he is lost in his own head. He is like 8 out of 10 steps down the road to chaos, but he's in that, like, I don't know it phase. He's not self-actualized. Horus is definitely like 100% gets it and is all for it. And it's a very interesting conversation that they're having. Because Fulgrim does not have his head screwed on straight at all, hasn't for months. He's got this crazy sword talking to him. The sword's definitely chaos touched. Intelligence in it. But he's still not treasonous. He's just kind of turning into a weird nutbag. Out of control. Sensationalist. And Horus is like, yo, dog. And Fulgrim gets the tip from Eldari. They eventually fight. He like parlays with this space elf. Space elf's like, yo, I've seen it in visions. Your brother is moving over to chaos. He doesn't believe him. And he goes, has this conversation with Horus. And Horus is like, you know, he does it in a very coy way. Or at least he starts that way. So he gets into it and they talk for like several days. So I think it takes like 2 days for Horus to get to the point. The whole time Fulgrim's like, oh my God, he is going to say it. He is going to say it. He's going to say it. He's saying it. So he's like trapped in his emotions of like not possibly believing that Horus would ever betray their father, having been given this this warning from this Eldari that like he is doing it, and being in denial during the conversation, be like, nah, he'd never do that. He'd never do that. Well, it kind of sounds like it. Like it kind of really sounds like, oh my God, he's doing it. It's here. And it's funny because Fulgrim is like, outside of his own knowledge, a very ready receptacle. He's already been exposed. He's already been doing the crazy. Everybody on his ship, not everybody, there's one guy, Solomon. There's one guy on the ship that isn't affected. Basically everybody that went down to this crazy weird planet that they fought, it's kind of jacked up by going into this temple. So everybody starts acting nuts. And the ship's full of like artists, remembrancers, artists of all kinds, writers, poets, painters, singers, and a bunch of them end up going on a tour of this planet after it gets conquered, and they all go in this temple. They all come back touched by Slanesh. And they're all artists, so they're all getting affected in different ways. They get this point where like no amount of sensory indulgence is enough. Like you get this very like brief bit of like relief, but everything's about excess. Everyone's trying to capture a muse that seems to just like be just out of reach, and it gets screwed up. There's one painter lady. She's like everything she paints. She's trying to actually paint Fulgrim. She's trying to do the big portrait. It's a big deal. It's a Primarch. He asked her to paint his portrait. And none of the colors seem bright enough. None of them quite seem right enough. Eventually, she like cuts herself and puts some of the blood in the paint, and then finally, it's like briefly the paints look bright enough to her. And no joke, it's kind of gross. Eventually, she puts poop in her paint. True story. That's canonical. But she's off the deep end. She actually murdered some guy that came to visit her. Actually, she didn't come to visit her. She basically entrapped the guy, kind of seduced him a little bit while he was hammered, and then she's like, I'm gonna use this guy's blood to paint this picture. It's so wild. So all this stuff is going on, like people on the ship, they don't know. No one's told them about chaos. No one knows what to do about it. The Emperor didn't say anything. So they're all going nuts. Fulgrim's going nuts. There's one Space Marine that wasn't a part of the attack. I think it's because he was injured previously, so he didn't go down in this one attack, and he's just watching everyone around him go nuts, except that he's still like one of these Emperor's children. So he's a proud guy, and he's all about perfection anyway. So some of the weird behavior sort of passes muster. He's starting to get this weird feeling that like, something ain't right here. Saul Tarvitz wasn't down there either. He's a very important character with a very dope name. And so they're all kind of standing around going like, what? And this whole faction is just basically getting eaten from the inside out. They have this apothecary who's doing all these wild experiments that are total heresy, but are approved by Fulgrim, and Eidolon is like the chief military general under Fulgrim. I don't remember his exact title. But they're doing all these weird experiments on the Astartes and like implanting them with weird alien stuff, which is just like straight up Xeno heresy. You really shouldn't do that. But like, well, if we messed with our genes, we could become more perfect because the Emperor messed with our genes. And that's how we got kind of perfect. And it's really just an amazing story of things falling apart. And there's a ton of dramatic irony because by this point, even if you were totally unfamiliar with 40K, just by reading the Horus Heresy books alone, this is like book 5 maybe, something like that, you've already seen Horus's aspect of how he gets on board. So now it's like you're seeing it from the other side. So you already know what's going to happen. So watching Fulgrim sort of like fall apart, yeah, it's really good. Watching Fulgrim fall apart is just like, it's not a surprise. It's all on how it's done because you've already seen it from the other side. Like in the first, I think it's probably the first book, maybe it's the first or second. You do see Fulgrim show up, but you're following Horus, and like you already know that Fulgrim's on board. I love books that are like that. That it's like, even though you know what's going to happen, it's laid out in a way that's very interesting. But yeah, all of these artists are just like absolutely losing their minds. Like they can only get the slightest bit of satisfaction out of any artistic thing they do. And it's gonna get wild. It already is. But yeah, there's a lot of like pride and fear of failure. Fulgrim says it himself. Like eventually gets his hands on that painting. It finally gets finished after like several people die in its making. And he talks to the painting. Like that's how crazy he is. Even before he's talked to Horus, like on the way there, it's like an 8-week journey. It's like 2 months. He's on his own ship. He's talking to this painting that to anyone else who's not affected by this sort of weird fugue, painting just looks like a crazy person made it. Like weird impressionist, gaudy, blood poop painting. Fulgrim talks to it in his chambers and like consults with it. Like, oh buddy, tough time, kiddo. All right, that's a good smokestack. These guys are round. I'll leave. Man, I have doubts. This whole ring is gonna get bronze, so maybe I'll do that. Having doubts with how I'm going to mix this up. Well, I can at least get that triad of pointy arrows. And I think it's just the first 9 Horus Heresy books that people consider like, I mean, they're all canon, but like canonical, necessary reading. So probably stick with those. I think by the time I get through those first 9, Act 2 of The End and the Death, which is about finally the end of the Horus Heresy. I read Act 1. Act 2 comes out in a few months. Such an amazingly long book series. I'm pretty sure I read somewhere it's either by pages or words. The Horus Heresy is the longest book series in like human history. I know that sounds a little crazy. You're like, oh, Nancy Drew, but these books are long and big. Lots of big words. It's probably by word count. And there's like 50 or 60 of them. It's crazy. It really is where a lot of things in 40K took off eventually, because there's all these different factions. Like this one faction that I'm riffing on, having a great time with all their gory stuff, all their body horror. There's one out of 20 legions plus a bunch of like orcs have nothing to do with the legions. Eldari, Drukhari, space elves and dark space elves, nothing to do with it. The Tau, all these different factions. So there's just all these different stories going on. And there's plenty of books that are just about the Inquisition or, commissars that are famous military characters that keep their units from running and hiding, from retreating basically, and keep morale up. Make sure there's not a lot of heresy going on. Whole books about those guys too. There's tons of stuff. One of the books that I read, and I never remember the title of it, which is terrible because I love the book. It was just about some guy who's basically he's an inquisitor. He's a space detective, obviously, with higher stakes than just being a detective, because the people he finds get tortured and killed. But it's just basically a noir novel. Pretty neat. Space noir. They've written so many books. People just chew them up. I do too. Nice, easy, long strokes here. There we go. We are going through a lot of this bronze. It is funny, there's some colors I have that I know I'm never going to go through one of these pots with. There's just so much, I just don't use that much. Like red. Like just straight up red. I'll never get through that thing. Bronze, I'll get through this. I'll need another one soon. Anything grimy, I go through those quick. Primary colors, not so much. There's actually a crazy ton of texture on this. So I've actually got to sort of flick a little bit here to get in these grooves. All this metal is just like World of Warcraft dinged up. It is fun to work with. And it is a lot more surface area, deceptively. Soaking through a lot of paint. There we go. You're looking good. Remember underneath. Oh yeah, totally gonna miss that if I didn't pay attention. So much undercarriage. That's actually visible. That's not hidden by some piece of armor or boot. That's one of those ones where you think you're done and you turn it and you're like, oh my god, I missed an amazing amount. That's the other thing you got to be really, excuse me, careful of. It's a blessing when you use a really light primer. Man, the stuff you missed, screaming. Of course, you can't see through the model, so if you're not looking from the right angle, you won't see it. But light primer doesn't hide the stuff you don't paint at all. And I guess if you were doing some like white Space Marine, you'd be fine, but it's not really my bag. Not really my bag, not now. I will eventually challenge myself on some clean models. I'm not sure when that'll happen. I do think the tower pretty interesting, and that probably would be my challenge. Paint, do a whole army of them. Everything's crisp, nothing's grimy. Just get myself into a totally different painting mindset for a while. Just learn different skills. Poor brush. Being a kind, but you've been around for a while, brush. You'd be all right. I made my peace early on with the fact that I'm going to go through brushes. I just am. I'm not trying to be mean about it, brush. Sound like the Emperor. You're just a tool. No, it's not like that. I love you more than that, brush, but I'm just not that careful. I'm taking account for the fact that this is a rough model for brushes. But I got a cup full of you for a reason. It's just the way it is in the grim dark future of my painting. It looks terrible for the camera, but there's a really weird spot I got to get into, and this is the only way I can do that while still hanging onto this and not puncturing my skin. Make it sound like it's dangerous. Well, I mean, I guess it is. If I was really stupid, it would be dangerous, but there we go. Oh, time to stretch. That one chunk of muscle in the neck. Ah, good stuff. Sip of tea. That is good. It's not cool enough to put the lid on it. Very important part of the process. I genuinely like this model. There's a lot of cool stuff on it. A lot of cool stuff. All right, I think I've decided now that I've stared at it a little bit that all the chimneys are going to get bronze. All the stuff on the chimneys that's sort of like all the round bits that go, those get bronze. Spikes will get lead belcher, and the pipes and the stuff on the bottom. Then it'll be somewhat consistent. What a good mix. All right, that is a reasonable plan. Now that I've done more of it. Pay attention that I don't grab anything painty. Always a challenge, big model like this, like I'm intentionally putting my finger on the skull so that I don't hit those arrows and I can feel it under my finger and I'm grabbing it by something. But it is. Takes a little getting used to because every other model I've had, it's been like sitting on a shot glass or one of those little holder things stuck onto it. So you're never touching any part of the model while you're turning it around. As soon as you work with big stuff, it's like, ooh, everything's got a backside. Grab down here. There we go. That's comfy. Oh, I love you, Warplock Bronze. Don't you ever leave me. Shiny but dark. Just like me. I'm not that dark. I'm pretty goony when it comes down to it. Paint on here. Actually, I'm gonna give this brush a rinse. I need to do that more often halfway through. Not even halfway through, every so often. So you end up getting paint. I saw a video a little while back. When you get paint on the base of this thing, that's what eventually leads to the end of it fraying. So you should try not to ever get paint all the way up to, there's some term for where the bristles are bound into the actual stick. But as you get paint stuck in there, careful. Imagine like this is your brush. If you get paint stuck in the middle, the bristles get frayed out like that. And it's really hard to clean all the way in there. So that's why your brushes fray. So even just giving the brush a pretty thorough dip partway through a painting session to just keep things loose in there is a good idea. Obviously, if you had self-control, which clearly I don't, you can see this far off. Like you don't want to get paint all the way down the bristles. But failing that, like I will, sort of giving it a rinse every so often, because paint's constantly drying in the thing. Keep it a little loose so that by the time you're getting close to done and you can actually hit them with some soap, you're not using soap against some crazed, impenetrable brick of acrylic. That's pretty thick. I gotta move that around a little bit. Camera's in a much better spot than it's been in a while. There's all these tedious things you have to do when you, and they're tedious, they're still fun. But like camera and lighting, I think about way more than any sane person should, unless several nights a week you're expecting to show people you doing things on camera. The things that, nothing keeps me up at night. I sleep like a pile of rocks, but I do invest a lot of time thinking about lighting that I absolutely didn't care about a few months ago. It's hilarious. You go on these deep dives on the internet, just like, and I understand lighting. Like at least I used to be a pretty decent to mediocre photographer. That was a couple decades ago. Now I'm getting back into it, and it's like I'm used to taking pictures of like still life and people and landscapes. This is absolutely public access TV production, which I'm also not unfamiliar with, but last time I studied it was also more than 2 decades ago, when we used things like physical tape. So I get a chuckle when I'm sitting inside of Adobe Premiere and I'm editing something, because like it has a razor icon. The same way like kids these days like don't know what the floppy disk thing that was actually a floppy disk at some point. It's like, oh, it's just like the save symbol. It's been lost in time. But I went to broadcasting school and never to be on camera, just to do production. And you'd sit there and you'd cut tape. You'd cut an ad. And that's why you even call it cut. And you'd mark a piece of tape. You'd run it through. You'd run it over this head, long ribbon of tape. The actual play head that's there, and that's what picks up on the magnetic crap going over the tape. You run it a little bit forward, and you'd wait till you heard like a space between breaths where you can make a decent cut. You'd mark it like a white wax pencil. Move around a little bit until you found the right spot, and you cut it with a razor, and then go a little further, cut another spot. physically tape them together, which at the time seemed entirely logical, and now it just, even me saying it, seems completely and utterly archaic. And you run that whole tape through something and broadcast that over radio waves. Insane. Love it. Love it. A lot of those principles are the same. A lot of the principles that I learned are the same, but I just haven't done it in so long. I forget all these terms. Like dip to black is like something I used to know as a term on the back of my hand. And when I started editing, I'm like, why can't I do a transition that makes the screen black and then fades in or fades out? It's like, well, gotta remember the terms, but you learn them. I mean, not unlike the meta of what I'm doing now. There's kind of a YouTube video on almost everything. So you just sit there while you're working, keep some other window open, your headphones on. You find it. I imagine some people at some point will be like, I've picked up a Miasmic Malignifier, the most unpopular model in the entire unpopular Death Guard army. I wonder how to paint it. Oh, there's a video of some nice old man talking about colors. The cycle of life continues. Nice and gentle with that brush. Yeah, this is already starting to dry. This is good. Wraithbone is a primer. Absolutely soaks up paint, dries it out. Extremely matte finish to it. It's chemically just different than all the other primers I use. And if you do not shake it for days, it comes out like snow. Definitely terrified that I'm going to accidentally break one of these spikes off of this bad boy. It's a precarious. It sits very stable. It's a very noble, stable model, but all of it is just weird spaghetti bits sticking off of it. It feels as precarious as like a child's spaghetti sculpture. You're like, oh, I broke the arm off. Like, I gotta fix this before my kid gets home and sees that I accidentally broke their sculpture. This whole model is just full of that. Alrighty. Yeah, we are coming along, making good progress. Staying focused, just knocking out parts. I do like very much how this bronze goes with our clayish looking Gilliman flesh contrast paint. It is taking us to some pretty red territory, which is very different in the box. It'll make any greens we use very, very nice contrast. Cross my legs here, sit in and get comfortable. I think it'll also have a good amount of interesting contrast with the rest of how Eeyore green, how drab green the rest of my army is. This will pop out nicely. Hopefully it'll distract the eye. Half the reason I'm putting this thing in my army is to distract the opponent into this huge furnace that doesn't move. Isn't really that much of a threat, and you largely ignore it, but you can't go through it. Hopefully enough gunfire finds its way at this thing rather than my army. That's painfully slow army. Hopefully this thing soaks up enough gunfire that my actual troops have a chance of getting near any one of the objectives they care about. Don't hit my guys. You just shoot my pottery. It's pretty tough. It's a pretty tough piece of pottery. It's durable. But the idea of placing something down for your army, and you get to place it outside your starting zone. It infiltrates. You just place it in the middle of the map. Doesn't move. Makes a ring of stink around it. You just gotta cope with it. You can shoot it. It doesn't shoot back. Rings, rings, rings. More rings. Yeah, another smokestack. You're so weird, Wraithbone Primer. Stuff doesn't want to stick to you. Needs a slightly thicker paint. I don't know what it is. It's just a very different primer than the rest. I like it. Like my Death Guard green. Very consistent. Very nice matte finish. Very textural. Very similar with Chaos Black. Relatively thin primer. Gives you this nice matte finish. The paint just like sticks to but doesn't soak in like crazy. The white stuff just gobbles everything up. Sometimes feels like it doesn't want the paint to stick to it. I'm wondering if the few times that I learned how thick it was, whatever material is like this thick gloppy stuff in there, I just shot out of the rattle can. And now everything that's left in there is like, yeah, it's still white, but it doesn't have any of the good stuff in it anymore. Oh, here we go. Funny when I say that I'll probably never run out of red. A better caveat to that will be I'll run out of red because of how much I use it, how much goes onto my palette, not how much goes onto the model. Like just about every model I've done, at least after my Poxwalkers, has some amount of red on it. The Night Tyrant, big walker, he's got a few little ocular things, just tiny little dots. This guy's got his OSHA safety pressure valve on the side. Got to keep this thing OSHA compliant. That'll get a little tiny bit of red. Plenty of my characters have like a little red ocular or a red tiny, not a full cape, not something you'd use a lot of paint on, but just like a sash, just like tucked into their belt. So the red comes out. Don't use a lot of it. Always leave some on the palette. There we go. They're coming right along. So this is one of the only spots on this model that's like actually kind of hard to reach. I was going to do this in parts, but it kind of worked out that when I was breaking it down and just sort of dry fitting everything, I was like, yeah, I can get just about everywhere. It's this smokestack that's kind of a little bit of a doozy. It's not bad. But mostly because I got to get in these holes. And obviously the ones facing out are fine, but the ones facing in are a little weird. And there's a lot of sight lines that you get through the model. It doesn't make it hard, it means you have to be attentive. Because what is front and what is back, you can, Space Marines sitting in front of you, look at them, and you can't really see anything from the back. There's all these little holes that are going through spots, all these little nooks and crannies where you can see through. And those are all spots to forget to paint. Or to paint poorly. To just be lazy about. Which I will admit I am a little bit. Just some good amount of bronze. Yeah. Finding all these little holes. Just fill them in a bit. And paint all the way down the bristles like I'm not supposed to because it makes this job easier and it's rougher on the brush. Beating up the bristles, going through these holes, but it is what it is. Give this guy another rinse. Yeah, get some of that paint out of there. But I do wash my brushes. I do care for them. Just don't enough or fast enough. Sometimes when I'm done at the end of the night, it's just like I am tired. I'm not washing all my brushes right now. It's just not happening. Don't have enough gas in the tank. It's like I will soak you guys a little bit, though you're not supposed to leave them just like hanging in a bowl of soup to soak. I will leave them on their sides a little bit. I have these trays. I'll basically just I'll prop something stick like that way so just the ends are going in the water. Like I'll do that sometimes. But I really should get better at more assertively and sooner washing them. They're not too price prohibitive, but they ain't cheap. They're not cheap. I care for them pretty much just enough to make them last a way where I don't feel like I'm just being extravagant. But I do use a lot of paints that are really not good on brushes, like metallics. Not good for brushes. Gunk up the mix. Things like grime, technical paints. All the stuff I love the most is just brutal on these guys. All right. What next? What next? What next? Spikes will be connectors. Will be lead belchers. So I think I gotta hit these Barrador spikes on the side. Leave that like this for just a second. Let that guy soak just a little bit. I would never leave that in there like and walk away, but a little bit of soaking is good for it. My subscriber count's going up again. I don't know why. I don't know why. It has fits and starts. I mean, it's had a couple severe, awesome fits. It's been really interesting to watch. Really, just genuinely interesting to watch. It went from super quiet, but like when I started several months ago, I'd pick up a subscriber here and there, one or two a week, and then it was like maybe three or four a week, and then it had sort of a, I should get those bands too. I started posting some video game stuff, and it didn't take off immediately. It really didn't. It did well. It did better. It eclipsed all of my other content fast, but still at a scale that was like very reasonable. It's like, yeah, I was just getting started. And one of those videos just went bananas. I think it was either 10 or 14 days after I posted it. I couldn't even find out why initially because I wasn't looking at anything that was like a week and a half, 2 weeks old in terms of analytics, and it just went nuts. I don't really understand YouTube. It's fun. I'm happy it's there. But it was just out of the blue. I mean, it was essentially for all intents and purposes, an old video. The behavior of most of these videos is that, like, at least how I post them, and I'm talking about stuff that is not live streams, has kind of a slow first day as YouTube figures out what the video is, and it tries to sort of serve it to different people to see what it'll be suitable for. And obviously it gets that for free out of subscribers because they're more likely to just kind of like show up, recognize what you've done, and check it out. But in terms of virality, it does have to like sample a lot of different people. So the first day is kind of like a hit or miss, and then the second day it's like, yeah, it does really good. Maybe it does good for like 2 or 3 days, and then it tapers off, and then you get like a very respectable amount of views after the fact. Some of the video game stuff I posted was just totally on a different scale and operated totally differently. In terms of audience, much more international. Now I'm at this spot where the very first video I ever posted is actually doing really well. Phenomenally well. And that thing's old. That's 4 months ago. It is terribly produced. And I'm not like being mean to myself. I forced myself to make that video when I didn't know what I was doing, just to get started and keep myself honest about strictly painting. I wasn't even into the lore all that much yet. I was just going to do painting, and they were all produced videos. Poorly, beginner level produced videos, but I would tape all the footage quietly, alone, cut it together, and then do voiceover afterwards. It takes a lot of time. And that first one is ruddy, but it's about more than just painting, which is good. It is painting my first model, which, there's no take-backs. Like, that is an authentic sort of experience. Feels like the very first time kind of thing. And it just sort of talks about why I got into this, and it generated no traction when it came out, which is absolutely fine. It's literally like it's just some stranger on the internet posting one thing. For like months, it had 90 views, but had 9 subscribers. Yeah. Yep. That pretty much did it. And I was like, by my own standards, I was doing fine. But yeah, the battle simulator stuff just like opened things up. Several people, lots of people have said that. And in fact, I've noticed it in analytics. And this is actually where my point goes. Analytics will tell you which videos are suggesting your videos. And what I saw very quickly when that first, 1 million zombies versus 1,000 Ultramarines video came out was that it was starting to that video started referring people to my other stuff. And then things like my very first elementary school looking 12-year-old mated video was getting pushed by my own stuff. And it was doing well, and it was picking up subscribers. And YouTube attributes subscribers to the video that is up when they subscribe. I'm not sure what it does if they're just on your page. Probably just doesn't do attribution, it just gives you the number. But if you look up your videos in analytics, it's like, oh, here's how many subscribers you gained. And it's implied that it's from that video. But really, it's just a measure of what video they had open when they hit that button. And if you think about it, those are two different things. If I go check a video out on your page and I like it, I might not even think to hit subscribe by the time I get to the end of it. And then it's serving me another one of your videos. I watch another one and I just have a regular old good time, and then I hit subscribe. And it's like, well, the video I hit subscribe for isn't the one that necessarily brought me here. So it's not like it basically telling which video converted someone in the business sort of sense of it. So what I started finding with that first video is that on the heels of the battle simulator stuff I was doing, it started doing really well. In fact, while we're on the subject, because I stare at this stuff all the time, too much even. Load up, load up. Yeah, it had, for the first 70 days, first 95 days. On the 96th day, it got its 9th subscriber, that first video, and now it has generated at least 42. And if I go dig in further and be like, oh, and this person came from this other video you did. So it worked out that dipping into video game stuff for a bit is essentially a good call. And obviously you're a very good example of that. You know, get people in through one means, and then obviously I'm sort of on, not obviously, sorta, like the channel's called 0 to 40K. So like as far as Warhammer stuff goes, it's on brand. I'm never going to do a battle simulator thing that is like Elvis versus Obi-Wan Kenobi, unless there's like Space Marines in it. Somewhat, I have a soul. I know for a fact that I could absolutely like make this channel big by just doing video game stuff. But that was never my interest. But I'm certainly glad that I found a bunch of people. Or that a bunch of people found me. I helped put myself on the map with the video game stuff. And it's fun. It is a lot of fun. Yeah. I love it. It's a celebration of the grim, dark future. Like I'll probably do it live too. Like when Space Marine 2 comes out, I'll definitely just play that and record it. Maybe I'll do it live, maybe I'll not. We'll see. I think another 40K game coming out. There's always 40K games coming out. The Games Workshop licenses 40K, like all of its Warhammer properties all over the place. It's such a hit or miss for like game content. It's like a thoroughly used IP. A lot of them are through Focus Interactive, which is like has some good stuff, but they're not the most consistent publisher. But Space Marine 2 looks really good. Is there a Rogue Trader game coming out? I don't remember. I should keep up with this stuff. It's a really good time to play video games. At least if you're into the kind of stuff that I'm into. Like Baldur's Gate 3 is great. Gazillion hours will go into that. I have stopped playing it, not because it isn't amazing, but because it's a very good time for video games. Starfield, I personally like. I pretty much like everything Bethesda comes out with. It's not perfect, get it. But as far as just dipping around, running your own sort of space business in a huge RPG with a lot of funny stuff going on, it's pretty good. Put a lot of time into that. Phantom Liberty, which is the DLC for Cyberpunk, comes out tomorrow. So that will start downloading soon. Loved Cyberpunk. Even when it was horribly broken, I still enjoyed it very much. I like broken things. DLC expansion for that sounds great. Even just the 2.0 update they did to it has a lot of really interesting beefy additions to the game and how it works and the skill systems updated and all this stuff. I'm a huge fan of the Payday series of games, and Payday 3 came out. And thankfully, at least for the purpose of what I'm discussing here and having no time to play them all, sadly, Payday 3 is really struggling with its server since the first couple days. It's getting absolutely hammered on Steam. It's really sad. no one can get in and play it. And that's one of those things where, like, in terms of early ratings on Steam, like, there's no way to have a silver lining. You just get overwhelmingly negative feedback if your servers are jacked, and there's no way to play it single player without a server. So they're in trouble. It'll be fine someday. I still own it, but I spent like a couple hours late last night, much later than I wanted to be, with like friends sitting on Discord, hoping we could get in. We didn't. Still haven't played it. You can play the tutorial. There's videos of people speedrunning the tutorial because you can't actually get into the game at large. That's what that's like. So that makes me sad. I like those guys. They're good developers. But people need to play your game. Like, that's the way that goes. You can't have anyone defending you on forums if no one can get in. And obviously, you always hate it when someone gets into a game and you can't, but at least they get to say something positive. The only language around that game is negative right now. It's so sad. Yeah, it's they were at like, I don't know, a buddy of mine shot me a message earlier today. They're at like, as of like 10,000 reviews, which is a lot for first couple days of a game. Like, it's mostly negative, like heavily negative. It sucks. I feel for them. Like, I make video games for a living. It's really tough on a release. Like, some stuff just goes wrong, and you try to prep as much as you can. But it's making video games is wicked hard. And it like they had a decent beta. It just sort of it ruins everything when this is a tough spot to get into. Yeah, I feel for them. It makes all that work that goes into it, and it's a ton. Gives you bad feels instead of good feels. But hey, it is what it is. They'll work it out. They're pretty resilient. Their games are. The Payday series is, I don't know, it's gotta be 13? No, it's gotta be like 10. I think it's like 10 years old. They have a good fan base. Everyone's just pissed because they can't play. Very understandable. I don't know exactly what issue they're running into exactly, but like, it's not like there's long queues, or if there are, it's not even communicating that. You just sit there and just watch. Like, you put your party together, like it finds your Steam friends, all that stuff. And you go to start a match and you just get the little circle spin around forever. It's weird. Sort of makes me wonder if they ran into a security issue and they need people to try to get in. They need those servers to get like slammed with attempts, but they can't let anyone in because it's risky, something like that. I don't know. I'm just purely speculating. I don't know that much. I know a little bit about server architecture. I don't know for realsies about it. I talk to people about it all day, but if you want me to build a server, I haven't written that code in 20 years. And what I did write was for a very tiny little school project. Nothing serious. Nothing to shake your stick at. But they'll recover. It's a very good fan base. I think that's the main thing I'm sad about. Is like their fan base is strong, and like is supportive. And even for right now, it's like, well, yeah, hype this thing up and it doesn't play. Cyberpunk ran into that. Obviously, it's a great game. It recovered. It's going to sort of come into its own. I'm a little curious if its DLC gets Game of the Year this year. It's a pretty, obviously the subject that I'm even talking about, it's a pretty thick field, so probably won't. I'm guessing Baldur's Gate will get a lot of Game of the Year awards. It's a very, very good RPG. I know you can't see this on the camera, but this is the only way I can hold this little spot. A very weird position. We've got a lot of shadow to it. But anyway, before I started painting models, I would have still not had enough time to play all the games that are out right now that are really good. And now I spend an hour or two every night painting, or producing stuff. Something to do with this channel. I do still play video games. I don't want anyone to cry from me. I just have to pick and choose those times a little bit better. Yep, there we go. Boop. There's that spot. Scooch my glasses up. All right, this is, as I bump into my pot of paint, this is looking like, I feel like I've gotten almost, if not all, of the bronze that I'm doing done in this pass. So I'm going to close this pot up. Give this guy a little bit of a soak. Let it sit a little bit, and I'll pull out my lead belcher and we'll just go right to that. This is drying pretty decently. Might be able to use a big brush on some of this if I'm gentle with it. I think I could give this a shake. Yeah, it's moving. Little hiccup there. Oh, sweet, sweet lead belcher. Yeah, this brush is in okay shape. Leave that guy aside for now. See if I can use the big boy brush for a bit. Is that? Yeah, okay. That is the right paint. But I'm going to scooch into a different spot so it's nice and clean. I don't know what I mixed with that other blob before. Get a good amount of glop on this wet palette because it's not going to dry out. So I can get out in front. I know I'm going to need quite a bit of it. Set that pot aside, dab of water. Another dab of water. I always dab my water on like one side of a glop of paint. And that way I can just go back and forth. Pull a little bit of water in, pull more paint in depending on how thick it is, especially with metallics, because sometimes they run thin, and when they run thick, they run visibly thick. So having some amount of control on your palette is a good thing. Let's start on top and move down. So this guy, hey look, I missed that little strap. I knew I immediately found one spot that I missed right out the gate. I knew it, but yeah, this will go fast with this brush. You know what? If I don't do anything about that right this second, I'll be a little distraught. I still have 4 block bronze on this palette, so I'm just going to hit this last thing. Always. It's funny that immediately the first place I looked, like, oh, there's a spot you didn't hit at all. They're always out there. This is just the one that I found this time. There we go. Much better. I do not have OCD. I'm pretty sloppy when it comes to this stuff in terms of consistency and all the things lining up the right way, but I'm trying to be more respectful when I see something out of place, put it in place. Not out of like compulsion per se, but to sort of just get better. To be more present. Not just let something go for the next session. There's always going to be a next session. Yeah, part of producing video stuff is to make sure, this is no accident, that I actually somewhat finish stuff sometimes. It's very easy to have projects just go on and on forever. And when I tell people, my friends from the internet, what I'm doing, it's sort of like a little mini contract. I'm actually going to work on it and try to finish it. It keeps me honest. And I don't have too much of a problem with finishing things, but the prospect of a shelf full of models that are all in 20% doneness, I didn't want to do with this hobby. I wanted to give myself a fighting chance, mostly because I am so flippin' busy outside of it that if I didn't take some measures to ensure that I'd stick to it, I had a pretty good feeling that I would just like end up failing and feeling bad about it. I don't mean like failure as a person, just like I'd have 3 models. I'd be like, well, I got my 3 models. I'm thinking about other things right now. And these videos don't let me do that. I don't know why. As much as I love you people, I don't really have an obligation to you, but I feel like I do. Part of me does. Sort of like speech act theory. Like if you say you're going to do something, it doesn't mean you're going to do it, but you're more likely to. Obviously, the end result, it's a very elementary lesson, is like now I kind of have an army. So everything works out. It's like I put myself out there that I'm going to make my stuff. People show up and say, hey, you making your stuff? Sweet, you're making your stuff. And then I stick with it and I get an army out of it. And you make some friends along the way, which is wild. I have learned so much from people because I posted this stuff. And taking people along for the ride is good. I've met a lot of people that have just gotten in touch, being like, hey, yep, I'm going out and going to the Warhammer store this weekend. I'm buying my first model. Yes, you do that. You do it. Go for it. Excuse me. Like being any small part of inspiration for someone else getting into this, man, that makes me proud. And someone's thing that pushes them over the edge into this absolutely ludicrously expensive and time-consuming hobby. It's like proper villainy. I love it. Like you can thank me later when you're poor, have no time. Ha 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 ha! I helped get you in. It's scary though. Like if you don't, obviously I've said some things like, "Hey, I have some experience editing stuff." Yeah, but I don't have a lot of experience painting stuff. I have some experience in photography. I was like, I'm more suited to start a YouTube channel than the average person. But as far as painting minis and playing Warhammer, playing it, man, I'm a game designer. Painting, oof, way out of my wheelhouse. Yeah, it is pretty cool, isn't it? Like, for sure. It's a it's a small world. It's a small world after all. And I think it's absolutely fabulous that, yeah, these spikes look really good in Leadbelcher. How democratized it is. I do read a lot of what like other people that are doing YouTube stuff post on like Reddit. And a lot of people are like, oh, I've been shadow banned, and maybe they have. Like, I'm not going to get into that debate over whether or not that exists. I don't post anything that is like in that realm of like controversial or whatever. The fact of the matter is, if you have, I was going to say if you have a computer, but that's not even close to accurate. If you have a phone, if you have a smartphone, you can produce YouTube content. And it's really interesting because some of the people that post on Reddit are like, what's the best way for me to edit my videos on my phone? I cannot imagine sitting in front of my phone editing videos on that tiny screen. It's another like generation gap thing. Like I use my phone as like a small form appliance when I'm not at my computer. And everyone a generation younger than me is just like, all I need is my phone. Like it's a luxury when I've got a bigger screen. But man, like, I'm used to having a nice big screen, looking at all my stuff. And if I have to, I can use my phone. There's people that are successful on YouTube that have only ever used a phone. Tape their videos, they cut them up. Insane. More power to you. I think the big thing that is like, I don't know, people talk about like making sure you take care of people. People are absolutely, especially since like Mr. Beast took off so much over the last few years. Like everyone wants to treat it like, hey, I could be a millionaire. Like I could never have to work again a day in my life, which is a total freaking misnomer and ignores all of the wonderful stuff Mr. Beast has said about how much he works at doing his thing. Any one of these YouTube celeb folks put a lot of time in. It's like beyond a full-time job. There's a lot of opportunity to not get rich here. But if you just want to get some stuff out the door and have people see it, anyone can do it. It's terrifying. Seeing your own face. I only just got to the point. I've only been streaming for like a few weeks. Preceding that, I was like a month ago, I was like, I'm probably never showing my face on YouTube. And I got over it. I try to get over myself as much as possible. But just hearing your own voice on YouTube, scary. But if you can get through that, and if you're not like, hey, I could quit my job someday, you can literally post stuff that people will check out all over the globe. Have fun doing it. Learn some stuff along the way. And I think that is just genuinely awesome. Because I don't think the vast majority of the world wants to watch me paint or listen to me spout off about lore with the funny, I say funny, that's very self-indulgent, with what I think are funny memes in some video I produced. The vast majority of the world doesn't want to. But I can reach the whole world. So, like-minded people, you can just find them. And that's neat. I don't have to find them at my local library anymore. I finally sound supremely old and I love it. You know, now that I think about it, that's not a pipe, that's really intestinal. I'm probably going to go over that with Bugman's Glow. I don't have to finish painting that one little spot. This whole thing is not the same as that thing. And let my eyes get lazy. It's all good. Yeah, it looks all right. Grab some more of this delicious paint. Starting to slouch. Yeah, that's how you can tell it's getting late. That's how you can tell it's Friday. Slide into Friday. Sliding into home base. Tires screeching. Some tea. Check why my phone's buzzing. Let some things dry. Good progress. I mean, this model is not going to take, well, nearly as long as that Titan did. Lots of big pieces, which is very helpful. I'm nowhere near done, but I can see the steps. Like I can see how bright that lead belcher is. Like that's got to just come down a huge notch. But that's just part of the washes. I'll do one run of washes before I varnish it, and then do the streaking grimy stuff or streaking rust. If I put my nose to the grindstone, I can get everything else on here just about that's supposed to be in lead belcher probably done tonight. I'll do like flies and skulls and boils. That'll be another session because it's all over the place and they're super tiny. And do a first run of washes. That'll be fast. Varnish it. Streak it up. Should be good. All right. Back to the grind. Yeah, these guys. These are the guys that I mean to get lead belcher. There we go. Here we are. It is a pleasure being able to paint with a big brush. You got to be super careful with it and not get mentally lazy like I am susceptible to doing. You can cover a lot of real estate, and that just feels like an accomplishment. Getting shit done. There we go. It is funny how much painting has like weaseled its way into my thinking. Like I don't think about it during. It's funny. I don't think about it during the day, like while I'm working. And when I'm working, I literally just turn. I pull this chair about a foot this way and turn that way. Um, I do think about it when I book vacation. I'm like, oh, I'm not going anywhere this time. Like I'll have obviously I'm gonna spend a lot of time doing childcare stuff, so my wife gets a little bit of a break. But I'm also like, man, how many models could I paint if I didn't have to work for a week? It's so crazy. It just works its way into your thinking. Like you're planning, man, a whole week off. I could wake up on Monday, make a cup of tea, just paint, 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 paint. Maybe have a little kid in a pack and play screaming in here the whole time. And now I'm starting to plan like, oh, well, if I got that time to paint, like that's when I'm gonna do like 2 squads of Plague Marines. I'll just knock those things out. It's a good hobby. I need to get my 3D printer working. That's what I need to do on vacation. Desperately. I have a resin printer and I've never gotten it to work right. I've never had the time to dedicate, and I don't like going out in the garage at night. Not that I'm afraid of the dark, it's just not well lit and not conducive to like. I need a computer nearby, or I need to go upstairs and downstairs a lot. There's a lot of stuff on thumb drives and things like that, and figuring out if it's calibrated is really tough when you're just working some shop lights. If I can get that thing, I just got paint all over my thumb. If I can get that printer working, then I am in business as far as this modeling stuff goes. Because then I can just make some stuff in 3D, which I am like not actually that bad with. I have worked with a bunch of 3D software in my day. I can make some pretty basic models. Like I could never make this, not never, but like without any schooling or years of work, I would never get to eons of work. I would never get to this. But I can do simple stuff like if I wanted new guns for some of my models, I just print them out, just make them. Sadly, though, I bought this thing and it never calibrated right. I never put enough time into it. And go to town. That's what I'm gonna do. Definitely over my vacation. Is I'll probably just force myself into that garage and just say I'm getting this thing working today, unless I have to like order parts for it. And if I do, I'll know exactly what I got to order and get them done. Because with that printer in the garage, like if I've got projects to do, it's like perfect. I can walk down to the garage with a thumb drive if the thing's working and just set it to do a job for a few hours, come back later that day or that night, pull the stuff off, give it a quick wash, and then fire it up and do it again. Just have a production line of pieces, parts. That would be so good. I would love that little factory, little production factory. I have several good friends at work that are big 3D printer people. None of them are working in resin right now, so they're like, I don't think I can really help you with that. But it's very routine to be on a Zoom call and see a friend with a project going in the background. It's like the coolest background. It's the coolest Zoom thing I think I've ever seen. It's just like someone's office is a factory in the background. It's just genuinely awesome. I mean, obviously having guitars hang up in the background is cool. Actually, some people just saw this in the background today at work for the first time, because I normally just have like a video effect background on, and but I have to switch everything back after I stream. Everything, my computer gets completely shuffled around after I stream something, because this camera's running, this mic is over here running. It runs into something called OBS, which is what puts my head in the corner and makes a virtual screen and all this stuff. So when I go back to work, it really messes with Zoom and Google Meet and all that. And they're like, oh, cool background. I was like, well, it's getting there. Not that cool. And it's also not set up right over my shoulder that way, so it's all in the background. But I got to show people some of my models. But one of the guys that I work with routinely has 3D printer jobs going, and it is so interesting. Because you'll just be on a call with him. We're just like designing stuff on a call, and he'll like pick something up off his desk. Like he had this little pug model, and then a super tiny pug model. Oh, it's great. He's like, yeah, he's just printing stuff. Always got something cooking in the oven. There we go. So we're getting these metallics in here pretty quickly. Be somewhat careful with this. Lots of bronze spiky bits and lots of lead belchery. And maybe don't put your finger on the wet spot, kiddo. Lead belchery tubes and pipes. It is moving. But yeah, I would like to get that 3D printer running sometime soon, because now it's just taking up space. Now it's just a total it's a waste. I got a good deal on it, and I knew I wouldn't have a ton of time to dedicate towards it right out the gate, but it's time. I would make all sorts of extra little props for every model. Probably most of them would be little nerdlings everywhere. Those wouldn't be too hard to do in 3D, and you could just print out tons of them. They're just funny. They're just comic relief for my emo squad. Here we go. Getting in that spot. I can't tell. I can't tell. Someone looking at it can't tell, so I'm safe. There we go. Try to pick this up in a spot that's not wet. There we go. Yeah. We're cooking with gas. It's very funny where the two primers meet, the white and the black, ends up looking silver. I found on several models that when I'm doing metallic work, specifically lead belcher, that it's purely dependent on where my light is that I can actually tell that I hit that spot, because it's like the exact same gray on a gradient. Unless you can see the shine of it, you can't really tell that you painted it. When you do see the shine on it, it becomes painfully apparent the spot that you missed. You really got to spin things around a lot and get a good sense of it. A little water. Yeah. Oh, look at all that real estate. That good, huge pipe. You are just going to get slathered. Good job, buddy. I'm going to hit all these grates. So what I think I'm going to do, not tonight obviously, but I think to get the innards of these and make sure that I get them pretty thoroughly covered with black so it's dark in there. I'm not going to hit them, obviously I'm not going to hit them with a rattle can at this point. I've already hit them once with the rattle can. I think I'm just going to take some black wash, just put a few drops in there and just roll it around and then pour it out. Sounds a little dangerous. Probably is a little dangerous, but I don't think I want to be sticking a brush through that grate. It'll be fine. As long as there's no screaming white coming out of it, it'll be fine. Shake. Pop the bubble. There we go. This thing laden with paint, and it's a little thick. Ugh. There we go. It's funny, I say something out loud like laden with paint, and that should be a warning to myself. Put the brush down, it's like, wow, that is thick. Maybe when you yourself use the word laden to describe it, that's a cue to thin your paints. There we go. Much better. Much, much better. So get in there and wiggle a little bit. Oh yeah. No problem. No problem. I'm not too worried about getting around these little nuts and bolts that are posted into the base, because this, as much as it is pretty, well, it is a pretty textured base. Maybe I won't use basing material on it. Maybe I do need to worry about these bolts. Maybe I am just being lazy. On this side, I was like, yeah, I'll probably just cover it with some basing dirt. But there is a lot of detail. There's this grate here with little maggoty things in it. There's boils in it. This plaguishness isn't just the furnace, it's the land it showed up on. Which I guess makes sense, because I'm guessing this thing gets teleported in from the warp. I'm guessing that's the fiction behind it. Alright, I get to continue being careful. Mindful. There we go. Good brushwork. Will hit the bolts. You know what? There's even bolts around the edge. That's a pretty cool base. That whole base is going to be done in metal. Not now. I'll do that last. But it's nice and shiny. That's cool. A very textured base model. Model base. There we go. That is all shiny. That's all shiny. Turn. That's not shiny, so we're going to make it shiny. That's awkward. Oh, I think I hurt the brush. You'll be all right, buddy. You hang in there. Go. All these little underneath spots, all of these metal brackets and braces. Spin. It is weird when you turn the model around a bit and you feel your hand stuck to a piece. I'm like, oh, gently. It is awkward. But then again, it's an awkward model, so there we go. This metal pressure valve. Get myself into OSHA compliance. There we go. Get you, you're happy. Happy little metal tubes. That was a little sloppy. I kind of screwed that up. I am getting tired. All right. How do we wrap this thing? There's a few more pipes in here, or tubes. Internet tubes. Those very gently without undoing my bronze work. Those are all intestinal bits. I don't have to worry about those. There's a little metal tube. I do have, yeah, one more pipe connector. Yep, that's wet. We're going to be reduced to holding it like this only for a bit. 5 times bitten, 1 time shy. Funny, for as much as I work on being more mindful and careful, I still am horribly reckless sometimes when I paint. I really do have to worry about that. At least get better at it. It is all fun and games. Like, I don't ever want to take this very seriously. And it tends to be around the end of a session where I just start doing reckless stuff. Some of it is inspired and leads to like good discovery. But I gotta be really honest with myself. Sometimes I'm just like trying to power through something too fast. Sometimes you gotta go slow to go fast. There we go. There's more shiny bolts. So as I look at this guy, there is some bronze in there that I'll have to get. Different brush, but I think I got all the metallics done, except for any spots that I'm just not seeing, which is enough. It means from like a casual view from the outside, from where the viewer would view the model, I'm not seeing any crazy bits missed. These are still just base coats. I'm gonna say that like this is GTG, I think, for this evening. You know what? I'll try one other little thing. I am right here. I am gonna get these skulls. It's convenient to do it now. That's rack, that's Wraithbone. No time like the present. Yeah, this is such a weird paint. Look at that. It's like blackish purple on the inside. Don't know. It's something up with the pigments. Because when you paint it, it doesn't look that way, but it separates that way on the wet palette after a time. It separates that way in the pot. There's like this black purple stuff in what is ostensibly just off-white. I need to take a class on pigments, an internet class. So curious. Like, How do you make that white? Well, it's 2 parts black. And I could understand that for like reflective stuff, but this is just supposed to look like bone. Weird. Wraithbone, you so crazy. This brush is pretty beat up, but it's tiny. It's too tiny. Ooh, it did get back together. I just washed it and it looked frayed, but as soon as I wet it, it got a nice point on it. That one's not going to recover. Yeah, you're the next victim. Good job. Hopefully that is enough paint. Give it a dab of water to thin it just a little bit. And we will just knock out these scullies with a base coat. If I do that tonight, my next task will be that much easier. I don't want to have to do this first before I do any washes on here, so I'll have time to dry. That's responsible painting. It doesn't have to be, it's already got, you know, a light primer on it, but Wraithbone out of the pot with a little bit more color to it. Gets it a little closer to bone, obviously. So getting that first coat on is definitely good times. There we go. Do like skulls. There's no denying that. Skulls are dope. One of my kids brought up the other day, they're like, well, now you're doing all this painting. If you get the 3D printer running, you can do all sorts of Halloween stuff. And I was like, ooh, that's a great idea. Print some like big skulls, paint them all up nice. Halloween this year, tiny little brushes, bunch of acrylic paint, varnish on a pumpkin. That sounds like a great idea. It'd probably rot from the inside. Maybe not the varnish part, but yeah, it'll be fun. We'll do some Halloween stuff. Very much celebrate Halloween in this house. All right, so I am very glad that I got that done. Now the skulls are good. Next time will be probably almost exclusively washes of different types. Hopefully I can knock that out. In theory, I can knock that out tomorrow. Then I'll varnish it. We'll varnish it immediately after that step. And the next day it'll be grimy goodness. And this will be pretty close. I do have a lot of work to do on the base. I've got that detail work. But it's coming together. Let's lay it on its side so it's got a nice little... Sit. There you go. It does sit pretty nicely like that. There you go. Get the thing scratch. So obviously, like, that's a pretty sloppy job, but that's all going to get washed over. And crisp the lines up when it's done. So yeah. Do have to decide whether or not I do all the detail work before I wash it. No, I'm going to wash it first. I'm not sure that that's the right order of operations, but it gets painful for me the longer I wait to wash something, because that's when so much of the detail comes out. So I'm just going to be impatient. Like, I want this metal to get dropped down, see all the little edging in it. I want all these little bits in here to pop out. Next time we'll wash it, then do details, then varnish it, and the time after that, probably some streaking grime. So what time is it now? It is 11:30. Finish off my tea. And I am going to call it a night. Thank you very much for joining. And hopefully we'll see you next time. Have a good night. Everybody have a good, solid weekend. Get some rest. Do some chores. Paint some models up. And we'll see you soon. Thanks a bunch. Bye-bye.